Tom Satterlee is a very interesting individual. He's one of the people we interviewed for the book. And he's a typical Special Forces guy. He's quiet. He doesn't really talk a lot about what he's done. And we knew a little bit about his background and his history. We'd interviewed him for the book. But when we sat down to interview him, we had no idea that he had been part of the team that captured Saddam.
My brother is a retired Special Forces operator. He was in the Army for over 25 years. Over 20 of those were spent in Special Forces. He had spent time as a combat engineer with the 82nd Airborne and then re-enlisted and went to the Special Forces Q course. They're trained to deal with the irregular, things that don't go as planned, and they learn to adapt and overcome to a level that most people can't even dream of.
He's one of those real American heroes that we don't really hear about, and it almost sounds cheesy, but he's the real deal. And he has a lot of insight for what the average person can take away from what he might see in the field of combat.
I actually was in Germany and I wasn't allowed to go to this recruiting briefing because I wasn't an E5 or an E6 at the time. And I went and snuck into this briefing, and it was a Delta Force briefing. And just the attitude that the guy had that was talking to the crowd, that's kind of the day I decided I wanted to go, and I was still 3 years away from even being able to go. And just the way his attitude, his confidence, clicks up a picture on the screen and it's a picture of the world. This is our training area. This is where we train all around the world. And I'm like, wow, it's so much different than just the motor pool and the barracks and then here, and I ended up spending 20 years just in the Delta Force alone. So I was one of the youngest guys to go through and pretty much one of the guys that have been there the longest.
They don't go into this with a sense of me, and if they do, they wash out pretty quick. They have to become a member of a unit, so they have to be aware of the bigger picture and how they fit into it. And they know that they won't quit, because if they do, then they let others down.
So we would take off about 2 or 3 times a day and just fly through the city, fly low, fast, and just swooping down in different areas. So on the days that we would do missions into a house, we would just flare at the last minute and stop, and hopefully they would think we were just flying by like every other day. Because it doesn't take long to alert the city, to what you're doing. And we did 5 missions with very little incident. We wore plastic helmets back then. We thought we were untouchable. It was the less you wear, the faster you could be. So plastic helmets, not Kevlar. The smaller plates, the thinner Kevlar, and just the ability to run and be fast. Because, you think you're invincible, especially at that age. Learned a lot about plastic helmets, and bullets fly right through those, and lost some friends that way.
As the heart rate goes up, you're getting an adrenaline dump. You're getting cortisol dumped into your system, so people will often feel jittery. Fine motor skills will deteriorate, which we try to educate people that if part of your crisis protocol, like in schools, if part of your crisis protocol is to locate keys, get keys, pick the keys out of a keychain, put the right key in the right keyhole, turn it, those are all fine motor skills. And with a heart rate accelerating, it won't work. Your fingers will not work. So we encourage people, anybody that needs to use fine motor skills in a crisis, including your paramedics, your doctors, they have to just practice, 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 so that as the heart rate goes up, they're able to maintain their fine motor skills.
Unless you've adapted muscle memory, you've done something so much under stress, you're going to go back to what you always know.
A lot of our law enforcement officers, when they're involved in a gun battle, do not hear the gunshots. They don't hear it. I've known, working with paramedics, a lot of paramedics, that when they're on scene and they are so focused on their patient, they're so focused on saving this life, they are in tunnel vision and they have no idea what's happening around them.
A lot of people go through training events, and every time their weapon runs dry, they'll stop, they'll lay their weapon down, they'll slowly change their magazine. It's like, in combat, that's exactly what they're gonna do. And they don't even know it. They're building their own muscle memory, incorrectly. So even if we're practicing, or no matter where we're at, if something stops working or runs dry, we always do the same thing, always, always.
And the big thing about my education is I teach people that that's what happens to humans. Because a lot of times what will happen is they'll beat themselves up afterwards. Oh man, I can't believe I didn't remember that. Well, your heart rate was probably 150.
And I've seen people in combat getting shot at actually do something so bizarre. You know, this is just because that's the way they've always done it in training. They just expect to be different because it's combat. And it's not. You're going to do exactly what you've done your whole life.